Okay. Hi guys. Thank you for joining. I'm just gonna wait for a few more people to come in and then we'll take it from there. So just as a few more people come in, and have any questions, but what you can do is that whatever questions you have, you can just type them in the chat box. There should be one popping up on your side, and then I'll answer them for the benefit of the entire group, so that it just works out a lot easier that way. So if there are any questions that you have, you're more than welcome to ask them and to post them. So just post them in the chat box, okay? And hopefully you guys can see it. In the meantime, what I'll do is I'll just go through a couple of things that I did sort of get a lot of questions on, and just to highlight a few things, not just necessarily on pre engagement, but overall in terms of your answering. Because what I've noticed a lot, and a lot of students have been going through their tutorial letters, which is a good thing, right? And you've been asking me, like, sometimes the tutorial letter seems to be answering the question differently, or it's not exactly going in line with what you've been taught. So, like, there was one question, for example, where students showed me the question, and the question was a preliminary engagement activities question. And that question specifically asked for the student to list the concerns. Remember, we know concerns are all negative, so we're happy with that. That the auditor should have considered or taken into account when the reappointment process or the preliminary engagement process was being made. So that was how the question was phrased. Okay, it was phrased in that way. So the key word was should have, and I'm going to put that in the chat box, right? And then now the memorandum didn't actually have that. The memorandum, what that did was it just gave a list of concerns. That's it. And they weren't even properly applied. It was actually quite disappointing to see that, because the problem that then brings up is that now you guys, when you're going through your material, you're studying, you're trying to make sense of this whole thing, right? Now, it all of a sudden goes different to what you were taught, okay? Because now the tutorial letter is teaching you something different. So what I'm going to say, because obviously you guys are going to encounter this a lot, okay? And there's not going to always be a lecturer or someone that's available at that particular point in time to really say, hey, okay, we're gonna address this, or we're gonna sort it out or explain how you're supposed to answer it. Okay, that's unfortunately just not gonna happen. So the best advice that I can give you is that you stick to the principles that we have been doing and that we have covered, and you answer the question. And by answering the question, I mean that look at how it is phrased. So this particular question was phrased by saying, list the list the concerns, or discuss the concerns that the auditor should have taken into account before being reappointed or before accepting the clients again. So when you're answering the question, you need to say, okay, the auditor should have taken the following concerns into account, and then you build up your answer like that. The key word or the key verb or whatever that you need to be phrasing in your answer will always be given in the question. So if the question says something like would have, then you'll end up putting the would have in your answer. Okay. So those are things that you need to be very, very mindful of. A lot of students have been asking on that particular thing. And the truth of the matter is that, with auditing, Your technical knowledge is one thing, okay? But what is also very important is the way that you actually answer that, and the way that you actually go about setting your answer, because that will determine whether you get marks or whether you don't get marks. Okay. So I see a few of you have joined in. So I'm just going through a few questions which I was already asked. But if you guys have anything specific that you would like to know, or that you want me to cover, or that you want me to address, then please type it in the chat box. There would be one on your screen. So please just type your question there, and then I'll answer that question for the benefit of the group. Okay. So the next question that I received was that what happens, if we get to a question and you can't think of anything else to write. Okay, so how many of you sort of find yourself coming to that question? Please type it in the comments, because I want you guys to be interactive. You guys need to be engaging on this, right? So in the chat box, there should be one on the side of your screen. How many of you all are struggling when it comes to things like you've been reading the question, and you've gone through the scenario, and now you've tried to write whatever you can write. Maybe the question is, say, 10 or 15 marks, but you don't know now what more you can write. It's just like you've sort of reached a dead end, or you've like hit the roof, so to speak. So how many of you guys feel that way? Okay, so you can just type that in the comments. Okay, I see Fikil has spoken up with address ethical concerns. Okay, so two people are talking about the addressing ethical concerns question, or those types of questions. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you exactly what you need to do in order to address those questions properly, because those questions are marked very strictly. So you'll notice that when you are answering them, you either do very good in them, or you do completely horribly in them. And so how many of you guys feel that way? Like, when you've actually gone through your paper, or when you go through the question, how many of you actually feel like, this thing is, either you're scoring everything or you're scoring nothing? Because a lot of the time that often be the case. Okay, so if you do feel that way, please just type it in the comments. But so okay, the companies, I'll get to that as well, right? But let me first address the ethical concerns. So in order to address your ethical concerns, right, those questions, remember yesterday when we were in the live, what I said, I made specific notice that you need to look at the particular person whose behavior is being called into question, or the particular person whose behavior is now, you know, not really, we wouldn't just necessarily just consider it as being unethical, but where you now need to evaluate in terms of the CPC for either OBA or SICA. Now, in your question paper, what you want to be doing is you want to be stating which code of conduct is applicable. Okay, so that is the first thing that you state, and the reason for that as well. Okay, is that clear? So when you get into the question, what you're going to have to basically do is the following, right? The question will tell you Mr. A is an RA and a CA, or they'll tell you that he's just an RA, but he's not a CA. Something of that sort will be given. Okay, whichever way they phrase it, you will notice that, and this is something that you should do in your reading time, the qualifications of various people or the professional bodies to which they belong will always be given to you. Okay, and some of you might have thought that, well, there's no real point for this, right? But the reason for it is because you need to then assume that there might be an ethical consideration or an ethical question or some kind of behavioral or governance structure in place for this person. Okay, so you need to first see that this person is an RA, right? And obviously, this is because now this is auditing. He's going to be an RA, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be appointed as an auditor. So the person is an RA, and we got that done. So the next thing will be, therefore, the Mr. A is subject to the URBA code of conduct, or the provisions of the URBA code of conduct. Then you will see, okay, is he a CA as well, right? So you'll say that Mr. A is also a CA, okay, SA. Then you'll say he therefore is subject to the provisions of both the SICA and the URBA code of conduct. Okay, so that's pretty much how you have to start your answer off. Starting off by saying which code of conduct is applicable and why. Okay, and that's always going to be based on his qualification. Okay, do you guys understand that so far? Are you with me? Please just give me some indication that you guys are on the same page. So before I move on, and just type that in the comments or something, and then I'll move on. Okay. Right. The next step is you need to know which section of the SICA or URBA code of conduct is applicable. Okay, so remember there's section A, B, and C. Okay, you guys are familiar with that. So do you see why knowing the structure of the code is already so important? Because if you miss this, you're not going to know which aspect of the code is applicable, and you're going to lose a lot of marks because you're not saying any of this. Okay, so section A is your general section for both codes. This is a general section that is just outlining your fundamental principles. Okay, you guys should be comfortable with that. You guys should know what the contents of that. You don't have to know it in detail. We'll get into that, but you know that section A is just talking about your general fundamental principles, right? Then section B will be the person in public practice, okay? And then section C is that person, professional accountant, or your auditor in business. Okay, you guys all remember that. So there is a difference now between all of this, right? Now, if they're in public practice, that is typically referring to the scenario where this person is an auditor. Okay. So, because that's when you'd be in public practice. Okay, makes sense, right? You'd be in public practice if you are an auditor. When would you be in business? Can someone, can someone give me an example of a CA that's in business? Just type it in the comments, okay, so that I can see that you guys understand. Okay, so CA in public practice would be a CA that's an auditor, but who would be a CA in business? Just any example. Okay. Okay, so no, so let me answer that question then for you guys. Okay, so okay, yeah, okay, so I see the answer came through now. Yes, a financial manager. Okay, so a financial manager is an example of a CA that's in business. Okay, so basically any position that the person would be in a company that's pretty much non-assurance. In a very simplistic way of explaining this, would be a CA in business. Okay. So now you would look at it, right? So the first thing we've identified is the code of conduct that is applicable, right? We've said that Mr. A is a CA and therefore the psycha code of conduct is applicable to him. Okay, there. So you've got 1 mark or 2 marks. It just depends on the memorandum. Sometimes this can actually get you 2 marks. Then you will say Mr. A is a financial manager, or the financial manager of XYZ Pty Limited, something like that, whatever. Be very specific in the question. Okay, you need to state the company's name and stuff like that. That is what is called, or meant by applying your knowledge, or not just theory dumping. Because if you just give a thing and say that he's the financial manager of a company, so yes, we understand that, the market does, but the thing is, sometimes it just sounds like a very theoretical point. But you need to say that he is the financial manager of, whatever the company is. Put the name in, make the whole thing very, very, very specific and applicable. Okay, then your next line will be, therefore, part C of the Psycha Code of Conduct is applicable to him. Right. Now, in doing something like this, you could gather anywhere just between 2 to 4 marks. Okay, depending on the memorandum. But I've seen memorandums which have awarded marks for these questions, or for putting these points down, right? So at the end of the day, you don't want to be missing out on this, not at all, because 4 marks can make a huge difference, especially when it comes to an ethics question, right? So anyway, that is how you build up your answer first. Now the next step is to start going through the specific scenarios or specific indicators in the question paper where it has been shown that there is an ethical consideration that needs to be looked at, or whether there is, something that this, CA has done which would be a potential red flag, which then would obviously, lead to some sort of ethical uh, issue that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm going to warn you guys for this, because a lot of students have this habit of trying to study the CPC through questions. Okay. By a show of comments, or you can give a thumbs up or whatever. But I want an honest answer on this. Okay. And now I expect to see responses, because I know a lot of students are doing this. How many of you are learning the CPC by going through questions, or spending most of the time just going through questions on the CPC and finding scenarios that way, and learning the CPC in that fashion? Because that is definitely something that I want to see in the comments. That's something that, when a lot of students start doing one-on-ones, then that is sort of like revealed at the end, that, oh no, the theory isn't there. Okay, so one person is guilty. I'm pretty sure that just it's more than one person that's guilty. But nonetheless, I'm going to ask, and I'm going to give you guys a warning against ever doing that, because the problem is that you don't end up seeing the full picture, right? And the same scenarios are not going to be tested all the time. Okay, so at the end of the day, when you start studying, and it's going to take time, and unfortunately, I know that you guys are, in a bit of a crunch situation, because look, you're writing in less than a month, right? So to start going through all of that theory is going to be a bit cumbersome, right? So what I would suggest is that you guys start at least reading through it, or highlighting those sections in your standard, or rather in your handbook, so that you can identify it in the paper. But you need to make sure, because at the end of the day, when questions get set, a lot of the times The scenarios mentioned inside the handbook will be looked at for reference. Okay. So if you by default study the handbook, you'll be able to identify it in the question paper. Okay. So that's why you need to know your CPC very well. Okay. That's the only way you're going to really be able to identify examples of scenarios that would be a threat to, for example, integrity or objectivity or professional competence in the UK and so on. Okay. So you're going to have to first rectify that before anything else can get done, before you can even think of answering questions on your code of conduct. You're going to need to make sure that you firstly know your code of conduct. Okay. Which makes sense. It sounds very simple, but at the end of the day, it's an area that a lot of students don't do the way that they're supposed to do. Okay. So what I'm going to suggest is that once you guys, have read through your CPC, okay, because you don't have the time to study it in super detail right now. Unfortunately, that's just, the reality of it. So we got to make the most of the time that we have. So what I would suggest is that you highlight important sections in the CPC, and let me just type that there. Okay. So at the end of the day, if you highlight these important sections and then you refer to them during your exam, it will reduce the amount of swatting that you're going to need to do. Okay, so that you don't need to sit and swat off, 100 pages of all of this information. You're never going to get through it. I mean, that is just reality. I think even if you had more time than this, you're still not going to get through all of that. So what I'm going to recommend is that you follow this approach now and you're studying it. But now when you're answering the question in the exam, I would suggest that during your reading time, you always look at anything that the person has done. Okay. And then try and link it to the fundamental principles. Okay. So what will you do? The first thing that you need to do is identify the action by person. Okay, that is your first thing that you need to do, right? What did that person do? That's your first thing, and you will write it down. So let's say in the question paper, they tell you that the financial manager bribed the competition commission for for a tender, or he bribed someone for a tender. Let's just say, yeah. Okay, so let's say the financial manager bribed a government official in order to win a tender. Okay. So you will write that down inside the question. That is identifying the issue, right? So when you're answering your question, you will start off with that, identify the action by the person. That's the point that you will write down. Mr. A bribed a government official in order to receive the tender. Okay, so that's the first thing you write down. This sounds very simple. I mean, but a lot of the time in an exam, it doesn't quite come this way, but this is the structure you need to follow. Okay. So that's the first thing that you need to write down. The second thing is that you need to write down the theory behind the fundamental principle that is being threatened. Okay. So this would be, obviously the fundamental principle of integrity is being threatened on this, right? Because he's not being straightforward and honest. So what you will then do is write the theory down as per the standard. So let me type this out, right? Identify the fundamental principle being threatened. Okay, that's the second point that you will make, right? Now your CPC does have a theory point for this. You know that. So when you go to integrity, it'll say that the chartered accountant has an obligation to be straightforward and honest in all business dealings. So, something like that. I'm not reading it exact, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? So that is what you will then do. Okay, you will then write that down as your second theory point. Okay. Now, the third thing that you do, okay, now this is how you have to build up your answer. Okay. You will say the fundamental principle of, mentioned above. Okay, or you can, or let me rather phrase it differently, right? You will say that the action by Mr. A gives rise to a self interest threat to the fundamental principle of integrity, because obviously he contravened this, or however you phrase it doesn't really matter. But the point is, you need to state that they've contravened this fundamental principle by doing what they've done. So you can just say, the person contravened the above fundamental element, rather, right? What am I saying? Okay, so that's that, right? So now we've got those two things there, right? So do you see we're building up our answer? Do you see how the answer is building up? And do you see where your marks need to be coming from? You know, how many of you have actually been doing your questions in this fashion? Just as a out of interest sake, because a lot of students that I come across, when I show them this approach, they are shocked by it. Or maybe not shocked, but they haven't really come across it very very frequently, rather. So how many of you can relate to that, and can say that? Look, because for me, why I'm asking this question is not to put you on the spot. It's for me to then understand that this has been largely an exam technique, and even to an extent maybe um, a studying technique issue that needs to be addressed. So then it also helps me in the boot camp that we're going to do, uh, to actually see how you go step by step. And by the way, in the boot camp, that this is sort of like what I'll be doing. I'll be going through, this step one, step two, step three. So there's still two more steps down the line, or three more, depending on how detailed you want to go. And I'll show you how you answer a question step by step in that exact way. So that's what we do in the boot camp. For those of you who did sign up for it, thank you. For those who are still waiting, that's fine. Just remember, I can only take out 100 people per group. Okay, just so that the numbers are easier for me to manage. Okay, but anyway, moving on. Okay, and I see Fikile said that she sums up everything in one point. Now, do you see the problem with this is when you've done that, the market thinks you've identified everything as one, or they think that you haven't identified the other 2 points that you were supposed to I have identified. So, do you see the danger of not spreading out your answer? Do you see the okay? So Daniel says he sees a thin line between 2 and 3. Okay, so 2 basically is going to the theory and saying that, look, you've identified uh, the fundamental principle that is being threatened, right? And then you're writing down the theory for that. So point 2, you are going to your act, and you are, or not your act rather, but you're going to your code of conduct and you are just writing down the theory for that particular fundamental principle. That's it. That's all you're doing underneath that point. Okay. With point, so that's for point two. For point three, you are then applying it. Okay. You are saying that by doing this, this person has contravened that particular principle. So you're creating the link. Okay. So if I take it from the beginning again, I'll say that Mr. A bribed a government official in order to obtain a tender. Okay. Point two, I'm saying, in terms of the SICA CPC, an auditor must act with integrity or be straightforward and honest in all business relationships, etc., etc. That point under integrity, right? Point three, I'm saying that Mr. A has contravened the fundamental principle of integrity by bribing the government official to obtain the tender. Okay? Make sense? You happy with that? I'm just answering something in the WhatsApp group quickly, right? Okay, moving on. Now, point four. No, I'm not sharing anything on the screen. So there's nothing on the screen as yet. This is just a discussion type of thing. Okay, so that's why it's just easier to discuss it in this way. All of the presentations and stuff, that will be during a normal class, and that will be on, like I said, during the boot camp that will be done in 2 weeks. So there's nothing right now. Okay, so as long as you guys can hear me, that's the main thing. If I on YouTube, you can't really present on the screen. That's I don't know, a functionality issue. So that's why I use different platforms for different things. Okay. But with YouTube, it's really nice. It sometimes works better than Teams when it comes to just having a normal discussion. I found I don't get disconnected and stuff on YouTube when I go live, or not even on Instagram so much, but on Teams sometimes that used to happen. But anyway, okay, so we're happy with points one, two, and three. Now, point four, this is where you will state, this gives rise to self-interest threat to that fundamental principle, right? So let me just type that out quickly. Self-interest threat to integrity. Okay, so do you see how that comes up? Okay, so now you will say this gives rise to a self-interest threat to integrity. Okay, or this gives rise to advocacy threat to objectivity. Whatever the applicable thing is, that is what you will write. Now I want to be very, very clear on one thing. Okay, you have to get the self-interest threat and the fundamental principle rights in this point in order to score your mark. So this is obviously a self-interest threat to integrity. Okay, I think we can all agree on that, right? I hope so. I hope none of you see just something else. Please tell me that you guys are all on the same page with this, right? Now, let's say you said it's a self-interest threat to objectivity. Okay, that wouldn't be correct. Okay, so you wouldn't get a mark at this point for saying that. Okay, you would forfeit that mark because you haven't linked it properly to the correct fundamental principle. Unfortunately, you haven't done that. So therefore, you've written down something great, but it's not the correct. Either the self-interest, or either the threat rather, is incorrect, or the fundamental principle being threatened is incorrect. But if you get one of those wrong, you're not going to get the mark for it. Okay, so you need to make sure that you get that point correct. Okay, you need to make sure that you get that point cor- correct. Otherwise, you're gonna forfeit that mark for nothing. Dash. Yeah, I'm not presenting anything on screen. This is just a discussion class, and people like you can chat in the comments and state what your questions are. Okay, because that will work easier. The presentations and stuff with slides, that would be more, like I said, in the boot camp that we're going to do. But this is just an outline of it. And the step-by-step approach is how, even in the boot camp, we'll be doing questions in this way. That's why it's over 2 days, because do you see how much of time this actually takes? Like, I mean, we've been talking about one example on the CPC for almost 40 minutes. And trust me, I can still continue for even, I can push this to an hour even, because there's so many things that you need to say, um, for the example you gave, can we not say advocacy threat? So you tell me, how did you come to advocacy threat? Okay, type that in the comments, because I would love to know how you, like, I just want to follow your thought pattern, or your reasoning behind it, as to how you came to advocacy threat. And Fikile, how do we sign up? I posted two links in the group for the boot camp that you can use to sign up for those. So there's one for level 1 and there's one for level 2, but you don't need to be a UNISA student to attend it. But if you're not a UNISA student, then just make sure you attend, the one that would be more suited for you. Because if you're going to attend, if you're going to write ITC next year, it sort of makes more sense for you to do the level 2 one. If you're doing something like a bridging course and stuff, then you can still attend either one, doesn't really matter, but then it would make more sense, in my opinion, to attend the one that will be done for level 1. A few students have asked me to merge the groups together, so we'll look into that, but for now it's separate. Okay. So, Mukoya, yeah, how did you come to the conclusion that it's an advocacy threat? Because I'm very, very, very curious to see that. I'm just trying to follow that thought pattern. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, that would be good. But while you type that out and while you continue, I think I'll, just continue with the example still. Okay. Are there any other questions before I continue that you guys have at this point? Because I don't want to be going too quickly and then it's like we're flying through the session. Okay. Since you offered the bribe to the tender, thus advocating for the company. Okay. No. Okay. So that's a very interesting way of looking at it. No, that's not really what advocating for the company is. Okay. Okay. How many of you understand what an advocacy threat actually is? Just out of curiosity, do you really like, specifically exactly, what it is? Do you guys have because I know that, like, a self-interest threat, that is very easy for students to identify, but advocacy seems to be a bit of a conundrum. So how many of you actually understand what an advocacy threat is? Or should I just explain that in a little bit of detail? Okay, let me explain what it is then. Okay, represent the client. It's almost like you have to represent a goal. Okay, so it's kind of, you guys are kind of on the right track. I can't say that you guys are completely out of it. So there is some level of understanding on that. Okay, but basically, what an advocacy threat is, right? So, in the context of accounting and auditing, when it comes to ethics and professional standards, an advocacy threat refers to a situation where that particular person that you're looking at is now, they become too aligned with the interests of, a particular cause, or the company that they're working for example, um, to the point where their objectivity, independence, and integrity, could be compromised now. So it's where they can't be unbiased. Okay, so in their mind, it's like, you know um, they can't see anything better than the company that they at, almost, or in their, in their mind, it's like they're very, very, very supportive of their position, to a point where it compromises their judgment. Okay, so now, relating it to this bribe, the bribe isn't where it's compromising his judgment to the point where he's saying that, where he's just trying to get the service. Let's say he was doing this in a way that didn't constitute a bribe being given, but he's going out and campaigning in favor of the company, or his, you know just really, 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 like being the brand ambassador now, if we can put it that way, for the company. Something like that would be more of an advocacy threat, because obviously he's got to represent the company, right? He doesn't have to bribe anyone, though. So that's the difference. So an advocacy threat doesn't necessarily involve a person, um, you know doing something illegal, because the thing is that you could be, obviously, any company that you're working at, you are expected to represent them in the best way possible, all right? So you wouldn't go to, let's say you had a client, and you're doing some kind of financial advice for them. You're not gonna tell them, like, let's say they need a bit more help. You aren't going to tell them, oh yeah, we offer this service also, but don't come to us, go to someone else. It's never going to happen. Of course, you're going to tell them, oh, you need asset verifications being done. Okay, no, you know what? We can do that also. That's the kind of thing. You're going to advocate on behalf of the company, right? Is there anything illegal with regards to that? No, you because you can obviously advocate on the company's behalf, right? You can't go and tell the client that the firm can do something that they can't do. So let's say they don't perform any asset verification services, but now you just want the business, so you lie and you tell them. Then that is more of an integrity issue, because now you're not being straightforward and honest. So, do you see the distinction between the two? Okay, it's very important that you guys understand that, because that is something that can cost you marks in the exam. Okay, are you guys clear with that? You guys understand what an advocacy threat is, just by a show of hands or a response or something like that, so that I know before I move on. Are you guys happy with an advocacy threat, or should I still expand on it? Okay, it's better. Okay, so from there, I take it that you guys do understand. Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, so you guys do understand. Okay. So we've gone through points 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. You guys can take notes and make note of this as well, right? The fifth point that you need to state, it's almost like a theory point, that you're going to get marks for free, right? It's like just like a theory dump, I guess. I don't like using that, but that's basically almost what it comes to, right? The fifth thing that you would say, or which you should say, is that it should be noted whether any safeguards can be applied in order to eliminate the threat or reduce it to an acceptable level. Okay, so let me type that out. Okay, fifth point. Okay, that is your fifth point that you're going to be typing and writing and should state. So, do you see how many points are supposed to be written when it comes to your theory questions? And this point here is literally just it's almost like a theory dump. It's like a general statement that you would make. Okay, so it's not a difficult thing. You don't need to think about it too much. You can literally just take it and copy it and put it in your exam. But uh, I would recommend that you don't just you all of you use the same exact wording and stuff, because remember, you guys don't want to have this whole plagiarism issue. I think at UNISA you guys are writing venue based now, so that shouldn't be an issue. You're gonna take your laptops with you to the venue, if I'm not mistaken, and you guys are gonna be writing there. So, but yeah, don't put yourself in a position where you all now copy exactly the same thing and put it, but the gist of it should be like what I said, right there. Okay. But that is the theory point that, that needs to be discussed. Okay. Happy with that. Oh, okay. I don't think that there's anything, because then I'll move to the next point. I don't think that there's anything else to expand on this point on. So just let me know when I can move to the next point, right? Okay, I think I can continue. Okay. Now, the sixth point is where you will then need to now go to your code of conduct. Okay. Because your code of conduct under each of those principles will have the safeguards or potential safeguards. How many of you have actually seen that in your code of conduct? So if you go under integrity, for example, you'll see there that they'll talk about integrity. They'll talk about examples of scenarios that could give rise to a threat to the integrity fundamental principle, and they'll give you examples of safeguards. So you can say the following examples of safeguards which may be applied include, right? Or you can say which whichever one. Okay, but do you understand that the point that I'm making is that the sixth point that you write needs to talk to the safeguard that it can be applied. And then do you have to think of the safeguards on your own? No, you can go to your code of conduct, and underneath that particular fundamental principle, you're going to find the safeguards listed there, examples of safeguards that are that can be applied. Okay. Now, I want to also, like, give you guys a little bit of a warning when it comes to this. Don't just write for the sake of writing. Okay. The thing is that your safeguard needs to be something that is relevant. Okay, so if your safeguard is something that is just not applicable to the particular scenario, then you're going to obviously have a problem. It's not going to be marked correctly because it doesn't make sense. Okay, so please make sure that you guys, if you're going to put safeguards in, that's great by all means, but uh, just make sure that the safeguards that you're putting in are realistic and that they are applicable. Okay, don't just write like 10 safeguards for no reason. And that's another question that a lot of students ask is how many safeguards should I put in? You don't need to put 10 or anything like that. 2 or 3 is fine. Okay, you don't have to go overboard when it comes to the number of safeguards that are written in the question. So 2 or 3 safeguards are more than enough for you to write. Okay, so let me just write. Okay. And that is basically how you would address your question on ethics in a comprehensive way. Okay. That is one of the best approaches I can give you when it comes to answering or approaching a question on your psycha code of conduct or even your urba code of conduct, but basically your ethics questions. Okay. So do you guys have any questions on any of the points that I've mentioned? Okay. So I take it you guys are fine with this. You don't have any other questions on this point or on the code of conduct. If there is anything, just you can ask now, and then we can unpack it and just look, or any of the points that I've mentioned, or even when it comes down to exam technique, if you guys have any questions, please, you can just type them in the chat box, and then I'll answer them. Okay. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to just answer another question that I received on WhatsApp. Okay. So a student asked on WhatsApp, and I actually started off, I think, with this question: what happens when you get to a question and you've run out of things to answer, or you can't think of things to write, or Everything seems fine in the question, like you have to assess risks or things like that, and you've just hit a ceiling, where it feels like, what, there's nothing more that I can actually write. Like, what else can possibly be on the memorandum? So, I mean, how many of you feel that way whenever you're writing an auditing paper, or answering an auditing question? Just by I can't really say a show of hands, but just in the comments, how many of you? I'm guessing it would be pretty much all of you that would be feeling that way. Okay, so the best way of approaching something like this, okay, is going to be the first thing, right? Number one, expand on the points. Okay, that's the first one, right? Expand on the points that you've already written. Okay, so now what do I mean by that? A lot of you, when you answer, okay, and I'm using the word a lot of, or the term a lot of you, very loosely right now, okay? Um, because obviously it might not necessarily be you guys or in that are in this group that are doing that, but you'll find that students will say something, but then it doesn't really lead to anything. So, for example, let's say we're doing pre-engagement expertise, and we have the first stage where we have a predecessor auditor. Okay, so we're doing our pre-engagement activities, and we have an existing auditor. So this isn't an existing client for us; it's a new client. They already have an auditor. Okay, great. So now we need to do pre-engagement activities on this client. So we go, and now we're answering the question, and you just state, you just sort of say there, you put your heading, you say legal vacancy. Great, your heading is there. You don't get marks for putting the heading. You just put the legal vacancy, and then underneath the point you'll say that uh, you know ABC Pty Limited currently has an auditor occupying the vacancy, or they currently have an auditor for their financial statements, or they haven't removed the auditor, something like that, right? You've just written that. Okay. Now, that doesn't really tell the user anything. Okay. It doesn't really tell, um, no, the marker, rather, not the user, right? Because, okay, great. But you've just basically stated what's in the question. Okay, we know that that there currently is an auditor. You don't get marks for stating that. Okay, so for putting the same thing in, you're not going to get marks for it. So by all means, you can write it as a build up to your answer, but you can't get marks for it. You need to expand. So they've got a predecessor auditor, or management have committed a bribe. So what? You need to start illustrating or talking about the implications of this, or the requirements which need to be met, and ask yourself, okay, have I done this? Okay, have I considered the implications? Now let's say we're looking at the auditor. We have an auditor that's in place, right? What does this mean? This means the legal vacancy doesn't exist. Okay, great. Now what needs to happen in order for a legal vacancy to exist? The auditor will need to be removed, in terms of the Companies Act, before a legal vacancy can exist, right? What are the requirements of the Companies Act, right? Then you will start going through that whole legal vacancy thing in the or the appointment of auditors in the Companies Act, and start writing down these requirements. and you'll make them applicable to the scenario as well. You need to make it applicable. You can't just theory dump, right? You will have to make it applicable and say that they need to remove him at an AGM, and it can only be done by the audit committee and things like that. But make it applicable and state wherever possible the audit firm's name, or the client's name, or whatever the case is. But make it applicable. Don't theory dump. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you theory dump, even by following this approach, if you are not going to apply it, you are not going to score marks. Okay, so you need to make it applicable and you need to show that you've applied it to that company. Right. Now you've written down all of those requirements. Great, right? A legal vacancy now, it exists. Now that a legal vacancy exists, what do I need in order for me to be appointed as an auditor? Because we're doing pre-engagement, right? So you will state, in terms of, I think, section 90 or 91, who would be disqualified as an auditor, right? You're going through all of that. Am I disqualified? Am I not? You'll start going through. You don't have to write all the theory points in that list, no, but you would state that in terms of section 90 we are not, or section 91, whichever one it is, I can't remember at this offhand, but we are not disqualified from being an auditor, that kind of thing. It builds up your answer and it gives a lot of credibility to your answer, and it's a lot of writing. Yes, I know that it's a mountain and a half of writing. That's actually what it is. It's just um you know but you guys are going to be typing, as far as I understand it, Unisa, anyway. So that should help you guys somewhat, I think. I'm not sure, but you guys need to put the detail in. Okay, you guys need to almost behave as if you're explaining to a child that doesn't understand. And you know in having that approach, you're going to actually see that you're going to find so much to write that I'm not saying you should, write until you've, like, exhausted your time. Please, obviously, stick within your, time allocated for the question, but you won't have that problem of not knowing what to write, because you can always expand on it. And that's what the point of it is. It's like you're unpacking the points you've written, you're breaking them down, you taking the one point to the next, and that's how it is. The second thing I will say is that always see what other points you can link up to that main point. Okay, so let me write that down for you guys. And okay, Daniel, I will answer your question just now, right? Okay. So always try and see if there's anything else that can link to this. So let's say, for example, with the legal vacancy one, we're going to run with that. Okay. I've said, see if you can link it to anything. Right now, I said, think about your CPC, etc. So how would we link the CPC to this? Let's say that there isn't a legal vacancy, but we still approach them and, like, no, 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 we're going to audit you guys and this and that. But we know that, hey, these guys have an existing auditor. A legal vacancy does not exist. In order for a legal vacancy to exist, everything that we've written out, in the points above, um, will not now be valid anymore. Like, I mean, we have to comply with all of this, but now we haven't complied with with any of it. We've just gone to the client and approached them, and we just, it's like we don't care. Now you start looking at other aspects. Is, in terms of ethics, do you think that's a good thing to do? Like, do you think that's the right thing to do? Like, It wouldn't be. Obviously, it can't be. So ethically, it's not right. Okay. So obviously, if ethically it's not right, whenever you think of something not being right ethically, what do we think of? The code of professional conduct. Okay. So does that make sense at this point? You guys are with me. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page before I move on. Okay. But nonetheless, we've got to that point where we know about integrating ethics into it, right? So now I've said that you need to think about it in that perspective or in that way or in that groove, right? Now, clearly we've identified that if we're going to pursue this and continue with it, it's going to be an ethical issue. Okay. Now, if it's going to be an ethical issue, we said the CPC is going to be triggered, right? If the CPC is going to be triggered, then we can say, okay, well, remember all those points I was talking about? We can even end up bringing that into the whole equation. And you can say that, well, if we pursue this, it can give rise to a self interest threat to professional competence in UK, or professional behavior, rather, not professional competence in UK, professional behavior. Okay. You can even say integrity. Integrity is a huge one that generally, in a lot of your scenarios and questions, that would be the fundamental principle that gets triggered. But those are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking of. So now, at the end of the day, we've still approached the company. Obviously, that's giving rise to a self-interest threat to professional behavior, because we are now breaking the law by, or we're behaving very unprofessionally, clearly, by blatantly just going and approaching the clients. So do you see how you can still write all of those points? Again, it's just talking on a pre-engagement activities level, but do you see how it links to those things in you from one thing? Do you see how many points can start coming in? So how many of you guys did answer these questions in this fashion before, or how many of you were taught in this way, that this is how you set it out, or have been doing it in this way? Because chances are, when you go to the memorandum, you're going to find, shucks, man, you've been missing out on a whole bunch of marks. And it's often for things that you do know. Okay. So then, okay, the question Fikila asked now is, what do we discuss when they say ethical concerns except CPC and King? Ethical concerns is the CPC. So that is what your answer will revolve around. Governance is your king. Okay. Um, Statutory matters, that will be your APA and your Companies Act. Okay, does that make sense? You guys happy with that? Okay. So yeah, are there any other questions that you guys have? If you have, please type them in the comments. Okay, so at this point, I don't really have any other questions to discuss with you guys. Like I said, we will go in detail in the boot camp on that. If you want to check out the links and stuff, let me just post it over here. Hold on. and then you guys can have a look at it and see whether you guys want to attend it or not. Like I said, there is a limit, but this is basically how we'd be going through each question, taking it from a step-by-step approach, because this is how laying out your answer is a very important thing when it comes to your audits. Auditing, I think, the way you've presented your answer is sometimes pretty much the difference between you passing and failing. I would say you guys know the work. I don't think that you guys have an issue in terms of your technical knowledge. I think you guys are struggling a bit when it comes to um, the way you answer your questions and the way you set out your answer, and the way you present your answer. And we've seen that in marking as well, because a lot of you guys do know the work. You do know the work, and you just don't articulate it very well. And that's just, it's a sad thing, because then you end up failing, and it's just because of something like, um, you know, you didn't write the answer down the way you should have, and things like that. And that's where, it's cost so many people marks. So this is why we're going to put in a huge emphasis and a focus during the boot camp on these kinds of aspects. Okay, we're going to do more in depth on that. So with that one, there will be a screen, and you will obviously get the recording and stuff, so that in your in your spare time, well, I wouldn't really say spare time. I don't think any CCA student has such a thing as spare time, but definitely that you can go through it in your leisure time and build up the way you need to answer. Because once you've got a solid structure and a proper sort of like a template on how to answer questions, I think that's going to make a huge difference in you guys passing and failing. And unfortunately, that's why with the bootcamp, the numbers are limited. It's because when you deal so closely with students, making sure that they actually go through everything properly and can understand it, it takes time. So obviously, if it's something like 1,000 students at this point, I don't have capacity for that. I'd love it if I did, but yeah. So those are the links if you want to check it out. If you guys were in the class yesterday, I think I did mention that it was supposed to be on this Saturday, but a number of you guys asked if I could postpone it to the following week, because you guys are going to be preparing for accounting. So I decided, okay, it won't be next week; it'll be the week after that. That's also the weekend before your auditing exam. So I think that would work better for everyone. But you guys can check it out, and you guys are more than welcome to WhatsApp me if you have any questions and stuff. Like I said, there's only 100 seats that are available. A couple of them have been booked out. I don't know exactly know how many are still available. I haven't checked the numbers, but yeah, I do still have seats available for that. And yeah, Philip, you're asking if it's always that you need to include safeguards or not. They will tell you whether you should or you shouldn't. Okay, if they don't say anything, if you have time, just put them down. Just to cover yourself, and just to make sure that you've given as comprehensive an answer as as possible. Okay. Rather you put an answer there and they don't need it than not putting an answer and they do need it. If that makes sense. I don't. Yeah. So that's just the thing. So I don't want you guys to be losing marks for silly things. And also on your laptops, um, I gotta ask you guys, how many of you have been practicing on your laptops, like when it comes to answering? Because if you guys are not used to using I mean, look, some of you probably would be using laptops at work every day, but if you're not, then this would probably be a bit of a how do an adjustment for you in the exam. And if that's the case, I would recommend that you guys start getting very familiar with how you want to lay out your answers. Please do not leave this to the exam to figure out. Okay, so please, that's a very important bit of advice that I'm giving you. Please, if you're not used to using a laptop, even if you are used to using a laptop, please give some time and consideration as to on the laptop how you're going to be laying out your answers for different questions, because it takes a lot longer than you think when you actually there in the exam, and now you're like, okay, how do I explain all of this, or how do I set out my answer? And you don't want to be doing it there, and then copying and pasting and moving this from here to there and there to there, and so my bit of advice: spend some time doing that. Okay. um, I don't have any further questions on my end, so you guys can sit here a little bit and let me know if this bootcamp was, I'm not bootcamp, this is the bootcamp, but if this Q&A was helpful. If it was, then I'll try and have a few more. This is supposed to be saved automatically. So I'm hoping that it does. I've had, I don't want to say bad luck, but issues with those things not getting saved, but on Instagram when I used to do them. So unless I was just doing it wrong. But if it does get saved, then what I'll do is I'll upload the video and I'll share the link on the WhatsApp group, and then you guys can just refer to this anytime that you need it. Okay. And yeah, we'll if there's nothing else, then I'm not gonna sit and keep you guys longer than I need to. But you guys can let me know if you guys want me to have more live sessions like this. Then we can always, I think definitely before the exam, just to talk to everyone, just to sort of maybe give you guys just like a motivational talk or speech, because I can end up sending 1,000 voice notes in the group, and I don't want to do that. So, just maybe to have a live session in the group, I think that would be good. And I mean, on YouTube, for the group. And anyone else that wants to attend, you're more than welcome to invite people. It doesn't mean that if they're not part of the WhatsApp group, I'm not gonna assist them if they need help now. So the more people that we can reach out to, the better. I think everybody needs to pass. Everybody wants to get over and done with this course and with their studies. Definitely nobody wants to be failing, or going into the Facebook group or any group and then seeing that everyone else has made it, and they sitting with one module or whatever, can be two or three. Well, whether you failed five or whether you failed one, you're going to still repeat your CTA. So it's still a horrible feeling, and you don't want that, and you don't want that for anyone else as well. All of you are in this together, and that's a good way that I would say that you should look at it. And if you help each other through it, and you ease each other's burden on this, I think it will just make the journey a lot easier. But from my side, that's all. I don't have any further questions on my end. And if you guys have something, if you guys want to hang around here, you can hang around here. It's not a problem. You can type in the chat box. I'll still be sitting here for a while. So if there is a question that comes up, just let me know, and you can just type it in the chat box. And yeah, we'll address it that way then. Otherwise, that's it from me. I'm just going to mute my mic until I get a question from anyone, and then I'll end up going. Okay. And there's no other questions, then all the best with the studying and with the preparation. And I hope to see some of you in the boot camp, if not all of you there. And if you guys still have any other questions, you're more than welcome to post them in the group as well. Okay. But otherwise, and enjoy your Heritage Day as well. I know it's not much of a public holiday when you're a CTA student. Such things don't exist, but make the sacrifice worthwhile. When you pass, you don't regret it. But yeah, that's the goal. Other than that, I'm gonna just put my mic on mute, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to type them, and then I'll address them. And if not, thank you for making time to attend the Q&A, and all the best. Hi there, Lebu. Okay, I see your question, and good afternoon to you as well. So you say you've taken a year and a half to get back to school, okay, and seems you've completely lost your fact knowledge. Okay, so how would you advise? Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna ask you is that are you doing CCA? Like what year are you? Okay, you're in Mopark. Okay, so I'm assuming that you are doing CTA though, right? Okay, so you're doing CCA full time, and you basically taken a break. Okay, and now your fact knowledge is not there. Okay, so it's a bit of a tricky one, if I'm honest. And the thing is that it depends on how badly or how much you've forgotten. So let's put it this way, right? If you are still at somewhat of an operational level, okay, you feel back for most models, okay. So the thing is that if you are at a point where you really don't even have the basics, okay, then I would really recommend. And the thing is, you're not going to have a lot of time for this, and I understand that, but there's really no other way of doing this, right? If you find that you're in a point where your basics are not there, and that's what it's sounding like to me, okay, then unfortunately you don't have much choice. You need to go back to everything from the ground up. So I would recommend that you actually start everything from scratch. Okay, not that you need to go back to now studying, like not that you need to deregister for CTA and then go back to first year or anything like that. No, you don't need to do anything so drastic. No, but for sure, what you would need to do is you need to go back and do all of your work again from um, the very beginning, in terms of starting, I'd say second year accounting. I was initially thinking actually all the way from first year, but I don't think that that would be necessary. I think that might be a bit of an overkill. But you need to start building your basics from the ground up, because all CCA really does is that it takes those building blocks and you start integrating them in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say like bridging, because I'd say this is more like rebuilding, because where you said that you completely lost your fact knowledge, that is a worrisome thing, because again, you don't really even have knowledge to bridge at this point from the way it's sounding, and you need to start like rebuilding. Also remember there've been a lot of changes in accounting and stuff, okay, you said a year and a half, so maybe there wouldn't have been so many in that time, but you do need to go back and to actually start seeing how you would account for things. For example, if I had to ask you now, um, if you had an airplane and you needed to provide depreciation on it, okay, and there was this whole components approach that you needed to follow, because let's say it was split up into components, would you be able to calculate the carrying amount of such an asset? Or do you even remember that an asset can be broken up into separate components, if they're significant, and each component must be depreciated separately and thing? Okay, so if you can, then it's not so much of a problem. So then what I would recommend is that I'd say start from your third year, go through your material, so you can go through whatever study guides and stuff they've given you guys to go through, and from that you'll be able to better identify where the knowledge gaps are, okay, but start building from a third year level, because that is something that I recommend everyone to do. That from a third year level, if your third year is strong, your CCA will go a lot easier, theoretically anyway. But I think in practice that's been proven as well. So focus on your third year. It's not too hectic at that point. If you find that okay, doing theory questions is a bit much and is being a bit more complicated, or you're struggling with it, then I'd say okay, fine, then tone it down a bit and go back to your second year work and focus on that. But it doesn't sound like you're in that position. However, I have to say that you need to build your basics, and that would be the best approach for you to be following. It'll just make your CTA easier in the sense that when things get integrated, you're not going to get like overwhelmed by it. You'll be able to understand where the level of integration is, that kind of thing. It's not going to completely knock you. So especially when you get to the more advanced concepts, it would, be a bit easier then. Okay, so would a third year from BAC, that would be fine. So I think if you start with that and you go through those and you go through the content, the theory as well. Remember your theory is very important. CTA, they test a lot of theory. Okay, you do remember that. So make sure that you're very comfortable with your theory. Okay, and if you are, then it's fine. Then you can just do questions, go through your theory, make sure your structure is there. But the third year would be fine, just like how you said it now. So that would be my advice and the best approach I can give you. Okay. You are very welcome. If there's any other questions, you're more than welcome just to type them. I'm going to answer Cobella's question if I've addressed yours. So with risks of material misstatements at the association level for investment property, I've identified a risk that some of the entities' buildings may have been hijacked. Does this risk have an impact on the associations? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to ask you is that how did you come to that conclusion? Because there needs to be something specific in the question that would imply that they've been hijacked. Okay. If there was, then on the assertions, it really depends on how you look at it. I wouldn't say so, because if you look at the assertions that are relating to investment property, right? It's completeness, existence, rights, and allocation. Rights, I mean, and rights, valuation, and allocation, right? So it's your completeness, existence, rights, valuation, right? Valuation not really at risk unless there's some indication that the hijacking of the building could have caused the property's value to go down, or that the hijacking has damaged the building and caused the value to go down in that way, that kind of thing. So you could justify it. To me, it's potentially a thing. I don't think it's a very strong thing necessarily, but it could. Rights, you still have rights to it, even if just because they hijacked it from you doesn't mean that you don't have rights to it. You still have the legal right to it. Um so you know I wouldn't say that that assertion is at risk. Existence, it does exist. It's not that it doesn't exist. And then completeness, I don't think that's an issue. That's more on your books. So I'd say your valuation assertion is the one that is more at risk, if any of them. Okay. Did that answer your question?